politics. We have an amazing guest waiting in the wings, Suzanne Kianpour, who's coming to us live from Dubai, not too far from the protests, the mass protests that we're seeing within Iran. Really excited for you to join us today. I want to thank our sponsors, SOCAP, which is an upcoming conference about impact investing and the impact economy happening in San Francisco, October 17th. I encourage you to check it out. I will be there schmoozing with lots of other impact professionals that care about creating social impact, and Empower Global, which hosts the Women's Leadership Challenge, a program for women to step into their power and create social change, and Stream Inspectors, the leaders in live stream production. You can follow along with us either on YouTube, Samantha Politics, our patreon.com/Samantha Politics1, and we're also now on Apple and Spotify podcasts. So those will be live tomorrow. So make sure if you haven't yet that you go on, rate, review, and give us the support that we need in order to continue this show. So let's get into it. I want to give you some background about what's happening today to give context about the mass protests that we are seeing in Iran today. So it's important that we talk first about the Iranian Revolution. So in 1979, the Iranian people rose up against an exploitative monarchy. The leader was called the Shah. Zach, you can put that image up. Unemployment, there were poor living conditions, pay cuts, and disillusionment with the regime were some issues that came up that caused people to rise up. There had been an increase of wealth in the country and the creation of a middle class due to riches in oil, but a lot of the oil also went into the pocket of the Shah's people, and Western oil companies. The West and the US, surprise, surprise, were aligned with the Shah, and we wanted him to stay in power. Well, because of the issues that were happening within the country, people rose up against the Shah and demanded a new style of government. It's really important to point out that there are some scholars that will say that religiosity was the driving force behind the revolution, that, they wanted an all the people wanted an Islamic republic. They were angered by the lack of religion. There were some people that were like that, but ultimately that really wasn't the main reason. It was essentially disillusionment, pay cuts, all sorts of things that traditionally foment revolutions in all areas of the world. So it's the majority of Sunnis were pushed to the side by the minority, the Shiites, towards the end of the revolution. The Shiites are more extreme, and this changed the political character within the country. And it also led to the formation of Hezbollah and fomented a lot of Islamic extremism in the region that we see today, including ISIS. You might remember that we put the Islamic Revolutionary Guard on the terrorist watch list in 1984. And Iran and US relations have been very tense since the Shah was deposed. Now, under the Shah, what about women? Women didn't feel as if they were able to fully participate underneath the Shah. And Ayatollah Khameini, who was an exiled leader that kind of took the face of the Iranian Revolution, and other people said, hey, we want to give you equal rights. We want to make you parts of society. They coaxed women in believing that if they really participated in the revolution and they deposed the Shah and there was a new government, that Iranian women were going to have far more rights than they already did, which is why a lot of the Iranian women were leading activists within the Iranian Revolution. It was really their coming to age of activism. It was very cold during the revolution, so there were a lot of shops and such that were closed. There were curfews. So women actually held a lot of activist meetings within the home. Now, the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khameini, Zach, you can put that up if you haven't put him up yet. He essentially, I think, was playing lip service to all of the rights that he wanted women to have, because he saw that they were a large mobilizing force of the Iranian Revolution. And therefore, he wanted to promise them the world. I don't think he actually meant it. So in 1978, from exile, he said, Islam wants to safeguard women's nobility. It wishes to make her a serious and efficient human being. So this is in 1978 from exile, shortly before the revolution. He was also asked about the role of women in Islamic government. And he said, women have taken part in the recent struggle in Iran to the same degree as the men. He said on January 23rd, 1979, this is a week before he returns to Tehran. We will give women every kind of freedom. So he's painting this picture for women that they're going to be a central part of society, that they're going to have all of these rights. Now, once he came into power and he received a lifetime term after being appointed by a panel of 88 clerics and became the supreme leader of Iran, which is a name that cracks me up. He then became a hardliner on religious issues, including women's rights, enforcing the hijab in 1981. And he made sure that Ayatollah Khameini became his successor. Now, Zach, if you could put up that picture of the Iranian women in the magazine. So you could see in this image of this, magazine from the 1970s that Iranian women didn't wear hijabs. They had their hair down. They wore clothes that were whatever you want to call them. Some might say suggestive. I would say normal. They wore normal clothes. They were not done in hijabs. They were very much open and, hair down. This might remind you of another society which has kind of gone backwards in times with women's rights, Afghanistan, and the images we're seeing now of Afghan women kind of going backwards with the same type of repressive, theocratic government that's now taking place in Afghanistan under the Taliban. Well, Ayatollah Khameini took over in 1989, and Zach, you can put up that image of Ayatollah Khameini. When Ayatollah Khameini died, and I know it's a little confusing, they sound very similar. They are two different men, but equally repressive. Ayatollah Khameini, so if you think about what the Ayatollah Khameini said in 1979, and now Ayatollah Khameini says in 2014, he says, one of the greatest mistakes of Western thoughts about the issues of women is this sexual equality. Justice is a legitimate concept, but equality is sometimes legitimate and sometimes illegitimate. Why should we separate people who have been built for a particular domain, so he's talking about women here, in terms of one's natural makeup, whether physical or emotional, from that particular domain and drag her towards another domain, which Allah the Exalted has built for another makeup? Why should we do this? What reason do we have for doing this? What kind of sympathy is this? Why should women be entrusted with carrying out male tasks? What kind of honor is to have women carry out male tasks? I am sorry that women and ladies themselves show sensitivity over this issue. So we can see how dramatically we came from 1979 and the promises of women having equal freedoms to all of a sudden saying that women should not be doing male tasks. And then it almost feels patronizing of like, oh, well, this isn't their natural role in society. They should be in the home. So you can see how the deterioration of women's rights has happened. So I think that's really important to put into context what is now happening today. Zach, you can play that slideshow, which you've probably have heard, the death of Mahsa Amini, who has now become the face of the protests in Iran. She was a 22-year-old girl who was Kurdish, was in Tehran. She was actually wearing her hijab, but she was wearing it improperly. It wasn't covering enough of her hair or whatever garbage they made up about it. And the morality police, which have been around to enforce this Islamic theocracy that's been in place since 1979, took her into custody. And it's unclear what exactly happened. They, of course, say that she had a heart attack, but it's pretty clear that she was beaten. Her family says she may have been banged against a police vehicle, and she ended up dying in the hospital 4 days after she was taken into custody by the morality police. This has sparked absolute outrage within the country with women. And I think it's important here, too. It's not just women, that women and men alongside them and millennials have taken to the streets, burning their hijabs, cutting their hair publicly, chanting women life freedom, death to the dictator, death to Khamenei. The protests are now all over the country, spanning 31 provinces of Iran and over 80 cities and towns. The Iranian government is not too happy about this. So they've been limiting access to the media through disabling the internet. Even just as we were preparing for the show, which is why we were a little late coming on, one of the videos that we wanted to play all of a sudden wasn't accessible on YouTube, and then it was accessible again. So they're really trying their best to block information of this from getting out to media sources, especially Western media, but they've really been unable to do this. When asked, Khamenei blamed the incitement of the protests, and we're going to ask our guest about this, on the US and Israel, saying that these incidents were designed by America, the fake Zionist regime, those who were on the payroll, and traitorous Iranians abroad who helped them. their main problem is with a strong and independent Iran and the progress of the country. So he's claiming that this is all kind of a hoax by the US and Israel and the Zionists because they don't want Iran to be an independent country. They want to have control over Iran, which is a bunch of BS. He finally came out and said Amini's death broke our hearts. But he's not really taking this seriously. They said they were going to investigate, but it sounds like, again, BS. Biden and the US administration has sided with protesters in his speech to the United Nations, and we have imposed sanctions on the country's morality police. We've also been working with Elon Musk to get these Starlink satellites over there, just as we did in Ukraine, to be able for Iranians to have access to the internet. What's happened with regards to these protests? So let's play some of the protests first. So Zach, you can stop that slideshow. So these are schoolgirls protesting. So pretty powerful watching these girls with backpacks who look like they're about 13 protesting and chanting women, life, freedom. We've got, let's see, women taking... And let's look at who these morality police pretty powerful stuff. You can see women being beaten, pushed into vans. You know, these men don't care at all. They are there to exert their power over women and make themselves feel like they're in power and to, you know, put into place religion, which I think in this case is just a means for controlling women. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but the death toll stands at 133 people, according to Iran human rights groups as of yesterday, because the regime has now reacted against the protesters and is indiscriminately shooting into crowds of protesters and taking people into custody. We're going to be watching a few more videos, but I want to bring in our guest, especially because she was nice enough to come to us from Dubai, where it is midnight. Suzanne Kianpour is the presenter of BBC's Out of the Shadows. She can be found reporting and anchoring on BBC World News, BBC World Service, and writing for BBC Online, and of course now as a guest on Samantha Politics. She's the creator and host of the Women Building Peace on the BBC World Service in collaboration with the Georgetown Institute of Women, Peace and Security. And she is hosting a documentary about Iran and Israel, which she's just finished filming, which we'll get to hear about. She's also served as the Capitol Hill correspondent for The Context with Christian Fraser on BBC, and spent a decade as a foreign affairs and political journalist, beginning her career at NBC News, spanning nearly 16 countries. Suzanne's also the author of Iranian Digital Influence Efforts, Guerrilla Broadcasting for the 21st Century, published by the Atlantic Council. She is an Emmy-nominated journalist and listed as one of Washington, D.C.'s most influential leaders under 40 for several years in a row. She was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, with a Persian and Sicilian background and is fluent in written and verbal Farsi. Suzanne, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a really important time to talk about this very important topic, particularly as I've been getting lots of messages from Iranians, either inside the country or outside, saying either please be our voice or why isn't Western media covering this story? So
Suzanne, I'm gonna, there you are. We had a black screen for 1 second. So what are you hearing? Can you tell us some of the sources and messages that you're getting?
Well, the number one takeaway, I think, is that this genie is not going back in the bottle. And what's interesting is that President Raisi, Iran's President Raisi today, said, he admitted that they have weaknesses and shortcomings. And then Shervin, the YouTube video that you alluded to, that when we were trying to load it, it wasn't coming online, and then suddenly it was. He was this singer who wrote a very powerful, beautiful song that really resonated all over the world, and was basically explaining the reason for why these protests were happening. And he was jailed for that. It's important to remember that music is one of those iffy subjects in the Islamic Republic. Just like dancing, just like mingling with the opposite sex, just like having your hair not covered. And so
like anything fun that brings you joy, basically.
Yeah, basically, the idea is you're supposed to be living as a pious person in this religious state, and your entertainment is supposed to be religion. And so anyway, long story short, he was arrested, and there was a global outcry for his arrest. But he's been released. But what's strange, actually, and this I was just getting intel about this before I came on. What's strange is that he's written something on Instagram in Farsi, and I'm going to read it. I translated it, and I'm going to read it for you. He says, "Hi, friends. I really don't know what to say. I'm infinitely grateful for all of the kindness you've had towards me at this time. I came here to say that I'm doing well, but I'm sorry that certain special events, also could mean interests, outside of Iran, with which I had no connection, have made improper political use of the piece I published. I wish for all of you to know that I belong to this homeland. I was born here, and I have always been one of you, and I became who I am today in this nation with you and your support, and I love it for that." Now, this part is key. "I am not ready / willing to change or replace it with anything else, and I will stay for my homeland, my flag, and my people. I will keep singing, and I don't like to become a toy or tool in the hands of those who do not think of love for me, you, and this nation. Greetings to you all. I love you." Now, this is coming on the heels of yesterday, the Supreme Leader, in a surprise speech, a surprise response to the protest. Basically, we were expecting to hear from him tomorrow, because tomorrow is an Islamic holiday, but he surprised us, and he spoke yesterday, and as expected, he blamed the protests and the unrest on Iran and Israel, which, sabotage is part of this so-called shadow war, which is the subject of my documentary. And so this statement very much sounds in line with what the Iranian government is claiming is the source behind these protests. So I think this is something that we need to pay attention to. I mean, it's not uncommon for people who are seen as potentially politically opposed to the Iranian government to later be kind of told what to say. So stay tuned on that.
Super interesting. Why don't we want to take a minute and watch that video? Have our audience watch the song so they can know what we're talking about.
برای توی کوچه رقصیدن، برای ترسیدن به وقت بوسیدن، برای خواهرم، خواهرت، خواهرامون، برای تغییر مغزها که پوسیدن، برای شرمندگی، برای بیپولی، برای حسرت یک زندگی معمولی، برای کودک زباله‌گرد و آرزوهاش، برای این اقتصاد دستوری، برای این هوای آلوده برای ولیعصر و درختای فرسوده، برای پیروز و احتمال انقراضش، برای سگهای بیگناه ممنوعه، برای گریه های بیوقفه، برای تصویر تکرار این لحظه، برای چهره ای که میخنده، برای دانش آموزا، برای آینده، برای این بهشت اجباری، برای نخبه های زندانی، برای کودکان افغانی، برای این همه برای غیر تکراری، برای این همه شعارهای تو خالی، برای آوار خونه های پوشالی، برای احساس آرامش، برای خورشید پس از شبای طولانی، برای قرصای اعصاب و بیخوابی، برای مرد میهن آبادی، برای دختری که آرزو داشت پسر بود، برای زن.
All right. So for most of our English speaking audience, can you take us through some of the pieces of that video that you think are the most important?
I mean, it's so powerful. And the English translation really doesn't even truly give justice the emotion. And that's why this statement that he's made is, you know, I mean, it's diametrically different to the emotion that he expressed in this song. And so, you know, on the one hand, one could understand how that might happen. And so he basically, it's called baroye, and it means because of, and it's just a laundry list of all of the reasons one assumes people are protesting. Be it, he talks about illegal dogs. He talks about the lack of freedom to, you know, embrace or kiss your lover in public. He talks about the women who wish they were men. Of note, women can't. There's been lots of fights over women being able to attend soccer games, for example. You know, music, the shame of not having money, because obviously there's been economic crisis for quite some time there. And so, yeah, it's a laundry list of all of the reasons why they're in despair, frankly. And this revolution, one is led by women, but it's what's been most striking to me, and it is a revolution. Obviously, a revolution has so many different. It's kind of one of those things where the Iranian government will not want to call it a revolution, but you know, we saw a green revolution in 2009. It didn't end up in regime change. Revolutions don't necessarily end up in regime changes. And so, but this is a form of a revolution. It's a rebellion against what this younger generation in particular sees as just a stifling of their civil liberties that they believe that they have rights to. They want to be free. They've grown up in an age where actually they've all had Instagram, so they've all had a window to the outside world, whereas the millennial generation, not so much. I mean, Facebook, for example, came about to the point where it was more mainstream, maybe like 2005, 2006. I mean, that's actually when Facebook kind of started coming about, right? And so by the time the Green Revolution came around 2009, that was when Twitter came on the scene. And Twitter was the first time where we saw social media really used as a kind of organizing platform for political purposes. And so now the Gen Z generation has had Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. Oh my gosh, there's what is it? Be Real, new social media platform. I mean, so whereas the Iranian government has up until now been able to kind of keep this Islamic code of life and rule the country under that umbrella, it is clear that that is not really going to fly. It's just not. I mean, women are walking outside, blatantly breaking the law, not wearing their hijab. Some are not only not wearing hijab, but they're also not. I mean, their arms are showing, their legs are showing. So they're just like,
yeah. What
done with
is
this.
it like for you? I mean, like seeing those images, like what do you think that the feeling is of people seeing women in the streets with bare legs and no hijabs? I mean, it must be.
It honestly is hard to truly explain to you how brave that actually is. I mean, you're quite literally risking your life because you're breaking the law. And so break the law there, honestly, it's different than breaking the law in the West. I mean, the punishment for breaking the law in certain laws is quite severe. I mean, for example, somebody, and I've just been getting so many messages and voice notes. Somebody sent me a voice note and told me a story about how she got fined and then her car got impounded, and she was told that if she did this again, she would be sent to prison. And her crime was she was driving and her scarf like fell off her head while she's driving behind the wheel by herself, and a camera picked it up. I mean, so this idea where Khamenei says, oh, it's not about hijab. No, it actually is about hijab. Now, what's interesting is that, I mean, obviously it's about a lot more than hijab. It depends on who you are. It might not be just about hijab. If you're a protester, it might not be just about hijab. But what's interesting is for my documentary, I interviewed a former Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps commander. So, quite conservative. And I asked him about Mahsa Amini. When I did this interview, it was a couple of days after after it had come out that she had died in custody. And he said, it was interesting. And it's interesting that you mentioned the kind of which sect of Islam is more extreme than the other. The Shia do not think that they're extreme. In fact, this commander told me that Shia Islam is a soft version of Islam. And therefore, because of that, he doesn't believe that they should, they should be enforcing hijab this way. And that, to me, was surprising. I hadn't heard that before. This idea that could we see the mandatory hijab become not mandatory, become voluntary? I don't know. I mean, it remains to be seen. Obviously, Raisi admitted that they have shortcomings, and other sources of mine that I've spoken to, some quite close to the government and the kind of inner circle of the supreme leader, have said that they're concerned about the breakdown of civil society. However, there is a religious sect of the country, and also they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. The Islamic Republic of Iran is stuck between a rock and a hard place, the government, because if they give way on this piece of fabric, it's quite literally, potentially, the beginning of the unraveling of the fabric of the regime itself.
That's so.
The fabric of the Islamic Republic of Iran itself. And so, but this has been brewing. This is not something that just happened overnight. And that's why this idea, I mean, first of all, Khamenei is giving at least the US definitely like too much credit. I mean, frankly, there are people that I've spoken to who would probably wish that, they could have been, that they could take credit, okay? Because it's no secret that there are, particularly on the Republican front, that they wish that this regime would change. Right. And so these protests are not organized. They're not. I mean, there's no leader for them, really. And we already actually started to see kind of a split between political ideologies outside of the country kind of wanting to step in and be like, all right, this is the moment, this is the regime change moment, whether that was the Mujahideen Khalq, which is like a bit more aggressive and has a pretty bloody checkered history, or the Pahlavi monarchists who think that the answer is the return of the Shah's son, who actually lives not far from you in Washington, D.C., or, obviously Masih Alinejad has been at the forefront of these protests, these anti-compulsory hijab protests. She has been at the forefront. And that's really, I mean, I think the most clear, organized protesting has been with the women. And when he says, you know, people in the West, I mean, he's not wrong about West women, Iranian women in the West who have been fighting for women's rights. But it's also, you know, it's also important to remember that those women aren't inside Iran risking their lives. Although I do have to note, Masih Alinejad was the victim of an alleged kidnapping plot, which was linked to the Iranian government in New York last year, 2021.
She was linked to, wait, say it one more time.
She was allegedly the FBI foiled a plot to kidnap her, which was linked to the Iranian government on U.S. soil.
And can you explain who Masih Alinejad?
Masih Alinejad is an Iranian woman living in exile in New York, and she has been kind of behind this White Wednesdays campaign, which is effectively and this is a lot of the reason why we have a lot of this content and these women kind of filming themselves taking their hijab off, is because she sort of made this drive to get these videos out. And this has been going on for years. I mean, it's been going on for the last almost 5 years. And so, yeah, this isn't a spontaneous, out of nowhere protest revolution movement. It's not, but it's clear that Gen Z in particular has taken it and is just like, no, we're just done with living like this. I mean, being here in Dubai and covering.
Can I stop you for 1 second, Suzanne? I think it's just a good point. I have a clip of Masa, so I think just because we talked about her, let's just show a clip so people know what we're talking about.
Think about women are being in prison just because they want to make decision about their own body. My body is my choice, and this is not a small issue. When Iranian women are fighting for their dignity, then take a stand and make the Islamic Republic responsible. Sanction all the oppressors and make them accountable, and ask them to release all the women who protest against compulsory hijab, and ask them to release all the political prisoners. That's my demand and the demand of many Iranian women inside Iran. Thank you so much.
So she's become essentially a spokesperson for Iranian. That speech was, I believe, at the United Nations.
Yeah, and she, you know, she's worked. I mean, she's kept this up for quite some time. But it's, you know, living here and working on this documentary on the Iran-Israel shadow war has felt like living in a tinderbox. And quite frankly, I was waiting for the kind of match. I really thought it would be, you know, something related to the kind of tit for tat that we've been seeing between Iran and Israel in the shadow war, which has included, you know, cyber attacks and assassinations and sabotage. But I truly wasn't expecting that match to be this.
Wait, when you say,
I shouldn't be surprised, right? I host a series called Women Building Peace, and we've seen women at the forefront of change and social movements. And this year, I mean, there's countless examples of it, quite frankly. And so I shouldn't be surprised. Particularly when it comes to Persian women. I mean, this is the thing. People were like, oh, you know, when it first started, there's so many people said, oh, you know, it's just going to die down. I'm like, you know how they say hell hath no fury, like a woman scorned? We'll just like multiply that when it comes to Persian women.
Yeah, Iranian women are not a joke. So can you walk us back through when you said, you know, this didn't come from nowhere? Like, you know, maybe the history of the women's rights movement, or, you know, we talked about Mas a little bit, but where this comes from the women's perspective, besides what I talked about.
So this piece of fabric is so symbolic, right? This piece of fabric on our heads is so symbolic. It's been a kind of push, pull lever almost for the entirety of the existence of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And women have pushed the boundaries of this mandatory Islamic dress for quite some time. And what will end up happening is the government will kind of, it's not like they'll formally loosen up restrictions, but the morality police will kind of turn the other cheek. And then suddenly they'll kind of ratchet up the pressure, so to speak, and start rounding people up. Now, essentially what happened, Mahsa's arrest, I mean, I've seen this happen with my own eyes. I've seen morality police pick up women on the street with my own eyes. This happens. And I must add that, I mean, this is not something that is unique to Iran. I mean, it used to happen in Saudi Arabia in the sense that there was morality police in Saudi Arabia who would come and make you fix your hijab. Now that's changed. You know, at least for Western women, you don't have to cover your hair if you don't want to. But that's obviously a recent change. And so, you know, this is something that's kind of been par for the course. What really happened, I mean, this is one of those routine things that is part of everyday life in the Islamic Republic of Iran that went horribly wrong and ended up being the match that lit this movement that looks like it's heading to perhaps a real change. But if anybody is saying they know what's going to happen, they don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's because that's what, you know, and this, when we were chatting before, it's like your statement about that this piece of fabric, if they allow this to not be compulsory, that could lead to the unraveling of the fabric of the regime. Like, what would that even look like the unraveling of the regime? Is it like the Iranian Revolution in 79, where all of a sudden Khamenei goes into exile and the government just goes poof, and you know, all of a sudden it's completely replaced? I mean, what could happen, I guess?
Well, there's several scenarios. And of course, as a journalist, I'm an objective observer of this. Right now, the supreme leader, I mean, there's rumors that his health is not great. I mean, he's quite old. And so we have been hearing talk about possible succession plans. Obviously, he wants to pass on the baton to his son. There are members in the kind of circle of experts who don't want that. And then there's the IRGC angle. There's been speculation about what could happen if things like really get bad. Would the IRGC take over? I mean, the reform group has, since the Green Revolution, has largely been sidelined, right? Zarif and Rouhani were reformists, but you know, since they've been out of office, they've been on the outs. I mean, where is Zarif, right? Like the former foreign minister who was the kind of champion of the Iran nuclear deal. So, I mean, yeah, I who knows? I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But obviously here's the thing. This is the Iranian diaspora who talks about regime change. And obviously there are people inside who clearly want regime change because they're running around with placards saying "down with the dictator," right? They're the ones actually living this. They're the ones who can't leave. They're the ones who have to live with these rules. So there's been a lot of criticism with the U.S. government about why did they take so long, kind of, especially the Biden personally sending his support. And it's precisely because, historically speaking, the President of the United States lives in the shadow of this failed coup in 1953, where the CIA was involved in overthrowing the prime minister in Iran. And so, and as we saw, the supreme leader used that and has tried to blame the protests on outsiders fueling the flames of regime change. And so, it's very clear that reforms need to happen because look at just how many people are so unhappy that they're quite literally risking their lives on the streets. But in terms of like what the political changes would look like, and would we see, a revolution kind of like 1979, but the other direction? I mean, maybe, but maybe not. I mean, that requires a leader. And right now, it doesn't appear that there is a absolutely clear leader. But of course, we're 18 days in. Who knows? Right. A lot of experts I've spoken to have thought 2 weeks ago that there would be a crackdown and it would all die down and everyone would just go back to their homes, and we'd be back to normal as other protests have been squashed. Well, but it's going on longer than was expected.
Right. It's amazing seeing how many populations of people. I'm just going to show one more clip. This is of medical students protesting, which I find so interesting. Susan, what are they chanting there? What are they saying?
"Be shut up," which is like it's a pretty bad insult. It's basically like you have no honor.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so, but I mean, listen, quite frankly, isn't it a bit insulting to kind of make assumptions that all of these people are just being driven by foreign forces, and that's why they're risking their lives and going into the street because foreigners are telling them to? It's like, oh, a foreigner told me to go run into the street and stand in front of a cop with my hair uncovered.
Do you think anyone actually believes that? I mean, it's obviously so ludicrous that how could anyone believe that's these are all Zionists in disguise?
People do believe it. No,
people believe it. Who believes that? I mean, who actually believes that?
You have to. It's quite the culture can be, and it's not just Iran. The Middle East itself is prone to conspiracy theories. I was based in Lebanon in 2014 when ISIS was wreaking havoc in the region and beheading American journalists, etc. And I wrote a story about how this conspiracy theory was going around the region, that America created ISIS, and Hillary Clinton admitted it in her book. And when I tell you the story was everywhere, it was from the taxi driver in Beirut to an intelligence official that I was speaking to at lunch. So these are two very different walks of life, and they both mentioned this story to me and believed it. So yes, and the thing is, the 1953 the 1953 coup, okay, is, even though it was almost 70 years ago now, it is still something that the government uses. But to say that there isn't suspicion
because
towards Americans,
you're saying, is because they're suspicious of Americans.
Yeah, there is suspicion of Americans. There is suspicion of the British, especially. And frankly, there's more suspicion of the British than the Americans. So that's any consolation.
It's wild thinking that people could actually legitimately believe that. Why do you think, so there's been a lot of criticism of Western media not covering this enough. Why do you think the West should care what's happening in Iran right now?
So my documentary answers this question, so everyone should tune in. And it's about peace in the Middle East. October 22nd on BBC World Service. It's called Out of the Shadows, and it's about peace in the Middle East, and that has, in an age of globalization, that has, repercussions for the rest of the world. We need to remember Iran is close allies with Russia. Iran is currently, or at least they were up until a couple of weeks ago, supplying Russia with drones to use in Ukraine. Iran is in Iran has made America and Israel its sworn enemy, and that's because Iran is a revolutionary state, and a revolutionary state needs an enemy. I mean, over the summer, we were seeing reports of the IRGC allegedly behind, again, assassination attempt, this time an assassination attempt rather than a kidnapping attempt, of the former National Security Advisor John Bolton, allegedly threats towards other US officials. And that is because it was revenge for the killing of Qasem Soleimani, who was Iran's top military commander, who Trump ordered the killing of in Iraq in early January 2020. So, I mean,
but the Iranian government, I mean, from what I understand, like, is anti-American, but that most, well, maybe not most Iranians, but there's a lot of Iranians who are very pro-Western, pro-American, and have, you know,
of course.
diaspora.
But I mean, that's why they want to live like, you know, that's why they want to live free the way Westerners do. And, you know, so there were in the, I believe this was last week in particular, there were people sharing the Instagram pages of the children of certain mullahs who are in the Iranian government, who are living, daughters who are living in the West, living in the West, not wearing Islamic dress in the West. And these are the daughters of mullahs. And so
what is a mullah?
A mullah is a religious cleric. And so they're the ones who run the country.
Got it.
And so they're calling out a form of hypocrisy.
Right.
You know, so why are you sending your children outside of Iran? And okay, if for some reason you feel like they should be outside of Iran, then what? Does Islamic dress only count inside Iran and doesn't count outside of Iran?
Right. I thought it was that was unbelievable when Khameini told Christiane Amanpour that she had to wear a headscarf.
Raisi, the president.
Sorry, it was Raisi. And she
said, and so that's the thing. So a few days before that, Leslie Stahl, the correspondent for 60 Minutes, was inside Iran, and she did an interview with Raisi for CBS, and she wore a headscarf, and protests were already going on at that time. So, I mean, people were up in arms about this. She got a lot of criticism on Twitter, but she was inside Iran, and that's the law of the land. And quite frankly, you know, as a journalist, when you are going somewhere and you're covering that country, you have to abide by the laws of the land. Mm-hmm. Is what it is, right? But when you're in the U.S.'s law of the land is not to cover your hair just because you're sitting in front of the president of Iran. And actually, every time I have met with an Iranian official outside of Iran, I have not covered my hair. And also, they haven't asked me to.
So do you think he was doing that to make a point?
Definitely, yeah.
To say, like, this is
obviously that's what I think, but I don't know for sure. But that, because imagine Christiane Amanpour is a half Iranian woman. Imagine if he'd succeeded. That's going back home, and that's the major win. And so,
right.
You know, that's a difficult call to make that she made.
Yeah, I was going to say, as a journalist, what would you do?
I would have done the same thing. I would have done the same thing because also, you know, if the alternative would have been to say, okay, yeah, sure, I'll do the interview, I'll cover my hair, and then take it off mid-interview. But one, that's kind of activism, and our job is not to be activists. Our job is to be objective journalists, because if you cross into the line of activism, then, you know, the other side sees you as an activist and not as a journalist, and doesn't see you as objective, and then you're not able to tell the story from all sides, and so that doesn't really do the audience justice, frankly.
I didn't even think of that.
We come under fire for this a lot because people expect you to take a side. I mean, listen, human rights, like the unjust death of or murder rather, of a girl I mean, that nobody is saying, like, nobody is that's not something you can be objective about. Like, that is a morality police arrest that went horribly wrong because brutality was used. That is wrong. That is a violation of human rights. And so there's nobody who's going to be like, I'm objective about this, right? And so, but, you know, if you agreed to putting the headscarf on and then continue the interview and then take it off, then
that becomes activism. I didn't even think about that option. That's interesting.
I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you have to think about as a journalist. And so she made a seriously difficult call, and the right call, for all of the reasons that I listed already. But you know, it would have been the first interview post Mahsa Amini's death from an Iranian official.
What do you feel like people in the West can do to support these women in Iran now? I mean, usually it's like donations. Like, what can people do to show their support?
Listen, sunshine is the greatest disinfectant, right? And so the reason why journalism exists and media exists is because it is part of the checks and balances against a government. And certain governments who want absolute power obviously want to suppress information. And so it's one of those things where, I mean, of note, the reason why the world is talking about Mahsa Amini is because 2 young female journalists broke the story, went and chased the story. One of them went and took a picture of her in the coma, and obviously then you could kind of like analyze what was going on the side of her head. And then the other one went to her funeral. And both of them, as far as I know up until now, are still detained. They're like, they were in jail. They were jailed.
What happens to people when they're detained in Iran?
Well, it's not good. Depends on person. It depends on. That's not good.
And is the goal to, like, you know, going back full circle to the beginning of the episode about the singer, about Shervin, is the goal when they're in detention, to intimidate them into not proceeding with activism in the future, or to take back what they say, or, you know, if they are released?
Well, I mean, right now they're clearly worried about a revolt against the government and regime change. So, you know, we're seeing from Shervin's statement, clearly not clearly, but it looks like he's been encouraged to say things that debatable whether or not he actually believes what he's saying. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, the idea is like, they don't want these protests have wreaked havoc, and a lot of people have died, and it makes the country look terrible, and it destabilizes the nation. So of course they don't want these protests to continue. So of course, you know, the MO in the past has been to use force and to kind of crack down. But I think because the world is watching and they know that, you know, maybe Shervin was lucky, and we don't know what happened while he was detained. We don't know, but he's out. And that's a lot more than we can say about some of these dual nationals, for example, who have been in prison for years and years over just completely made up charges of alleged espionage. I mean, that's the thing. The interpretation of the law can be so, I mean, there's just no rhyme or reason.
So I wonder, and I know we're getting low on time. In this book by Maria Stefan and Erica Chenoweth about nonviolent resistance movements, they say that one of the breaking points of revolutions, of becoming successful, is when the military defects and joins the protesters. And I know that happened partially in 79. Do you think there's any likelihood that the military will decide to side with the people?
The military apparatus of Iran is actually quite complicated. They effectively have like two armies. The more likely scenario is, and again, this kind of depends on what happens with Khamenei and his, kind of health. But, we could potentially see IRGC taking over, which it could look like, a sort of mediating, peacemaking type deal. But I wouldn't really call it the IRGC kind of defecting and siding with the protesters because they're already quite powerful. It's different than a kind of military coup in the sense that one would think about it. I mean, Iran is a very complex, complicated nation that, like I said, anybody who says that they know what's going to happen has no idea what they're talking about. You just don't. And also, American intelligence. Speaking of this idea that this is all orchestrated by American intelligence. American intelligence got 1970 wrong. 1979 super wrong.
Really? Do you think that wasn't going to happen?
Yeah, there was this cable that was sent just on the eve of everything just falling apart, and it was it's time for us to think about the unthinkable. And it's like, oh well, you're late. It's only been brewing for an entire year. But it's also, the Shah was America's man, so they didn't really want to believe it. In this case, I feel like there's a risk of believing that this is the end of the regime when it might not be, but it also might be. I mean, again, we have no idea. We're at day 18.
Right. Are there any other, before I let you go, any other, stories you want to share from your sources on the ground that you think are important that people should know about?
I mean, the thing is, again, this is very much about women's rights. And the women went out there and they're like, we're just sick of this. And the men backed them up. And now we're seeing schoolgirls doing this, and then we're seeing school boys backing them up. So it's what we're seeing is unprecedented, and what's unprecedented can be revolutionary. Now, the definition of revolution varies. Not all revolutions are created equal.
Yeah. So, but the nature you're saying of having, men really backing women up for an issue that's very much about women's rights.
Exactly.
And women's rights to, it's so
change is coming. We don't know what that change actually is, but it's coming. And in fact, actually, it's already arrived.
And it's interesting thinking about, obviously, like, when I listen to Masa talk and say, my body, my choice, obviously, the rollback on reproductive rights in America and how important it is that not just women are the ones standing up and saying, give us back our bodies, but that men are also standing behind us and saying, her body, her choice, our family, our choice. And that's really, really critical, is having both genders to be a part of this. Because
I have to say, there's so many similarities between America and Iran. Honestly, and I get into this a bit in the documentary. Iran is, at the end of the day, a religious country. America is, at the end of the day, a religious country. And we're seeing these parallels when it comes to, when a government is kind of in trouble in a way. What do they turn to? They turn to women and controlling women. But what the difference is, we're seeing in Iran, we're seeing the men back up the women. But I don't really see that in the US. I don't really see that in the US when it comes to Roe v. Wade, at least. Obviously, there's male politicians, but those are politicians. That's a platform. It's midterms. Do you know, like, we're physically seeing men walking by women in Iran in a dress and no hijab, protecting her.
Wow.
There was this video early days when these protests kicked off, where this woman was walking down the street wearing a sundress and didn't have her hair covered, and there was a guy filming her, and he was like praising her. I mean, it was one of those things, when you hear a guy talking to you on the street, you just assume they're harassing you, which is horrible, right? It's horrible that we expect that, and that's normalized. But that's not what was happening in this particular scene. He was literally like praising her bravery, and he was protecting her.
Unbelievable. Well, any last, messages before I let you go to bed?
No, it's bedtime. I think that this story needs to continue to be paid attention to. It's change is always inevitable, and reform. I mean, here's the thing: the conversations I've been having with these, conservative men who are close to the government, who are former officials, for example, even they are recognizing that there needs to be a kind of reckoning, and that's pretty telling. And so, they can say, Khamenei can say, oh, the US media is stoking this. We're not. Like, whatever. We're just not. We're covering a story, and we're going to continue covering it because it's important, and it's a part of history. Just like when the Iranian Revolution was happening, the Islamic Revolution was happening, the media covered it because it was important, and it was a part of history.
Right.
Regardless of what the reporters individually felt about it, isn't what mattered. It was, we have a story to cover. It's change. It's transformative, pivotal, etc.
Right. Well, Suzanne, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out. I know you're slammed right now, and I want to encourage people that are watching to watch your documentary when it comes out on October 25th on BBC, called Out of the Shadows, about Iran, Israel, and Middle East peace, or the quest for that. I'm sure it's going to be terrific. I cannot wait to watch it. So I really want to thank you for bringing light to these issues, for giving us inside information, and for paying attention to this issue and being willing to come on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for giving this story attention. Like I said, I've been getting messages from people feeling like it hasn't been getting enough attention in the US media in particular, which is why it's ironic that Khamenei blamed the US media. Like, well, there was a hurricane, and there's Russia, and there's a lot going on, I guess.
No. I mean, I genuinely think it's because of, I think that, the media is also masculinized in the sense of when we think about global politics and foreign policy, it's always like this grand strategy things, like, how many, times can we cover the Iran nuclear deal? Like, yes, it's a big deal, but it's also like nuclear weapons, like guns and bombs and missiles and nukes and all the kind of manly stuff that we want to know what's happening with the nukes. And,
that's interesting. I've never thought of it that way. That's
really
interesting.
That women showing their legs in the street and waving hijabs in the air, burning hijabs, I don't think is as interesting from like a global geostrategy type perspective, because it's like, it's just women, right? And I think that people don't understand that women can be the fronts of huge watershed moments in world history, because they're usually usually not told like that.
Well, that's true, but that's also because who is telling the stories, right? And the reason why I launched my Women Building Peace series for the BBC is I saw this statistic that just shook me, frankly, at how little we've really come. To this day, still, less than 25% of news stories, women are the subject of. But, hey, I covered these nuclear negotiations. I traveled with Secretary Kerry when they were, in 2013, when we reached the US and the P5+1 reached the first interim agreement. So like the framework that then ended up becoming the JCPOA. That was on my birthday in 2013, and I missed my birthday party in Washington. I like these themed birthday parties, right? And
right.
And so I missed my own birthday party, as in people showed up and I wasn't there. They didn't get the memo that I had to postpone it because John Kerry was my ride home, because they came, at least he came home. At least I got a nuclear deal, AKA a good story for me to cover for my birthday. And so, okay, so then now what? We're back at square one, really. So, it's interesting to put it that way, where it's like, okay, so there's the men negotiating the nuclear deal. It used to be, actually, I wrote a piece about the women of the Iran deal. It was really interesting. But, now it really is mostly men. And so the men trying to renegotiate the nuclear deal, and then the women in Iran holding the Iranian government's feet to the fire. Which one's more successful? It's a battle of the sexes, isn't it? Stay tuned. I'm grabbing my popcorn.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is why having podcasts like yours, this is part of why I started the show, is so that we can bring attention to these issues and not just cover the same stuff over and over and over and over again, and bring attention to global news and global women, because we're all connected with one another. It's also interesting seeing what's happening in Saudi Arabia in terms of reforms and women, and women demanding more rights there. I think this is within the region, and who knows what's going to happen in Afghanistan, but that's obviously, that can't go on forever.
Well, and that's the thing. We're not talking about these brave women of Afghanistan who they have been through absolute hell. The world really turned their back on them. My first episode of Women Building Peace is on Afghanistan, and I connected Hillary Clinton with a young woman. At the time, she was hiding in a safe house from the Taliban, and connected the two of them. And it was a really emotional conversation. And, a year later, some of these girls are still stuck there and can't have an education and are under threat because their family members worked for the American government, etc. But they're going out in the streets in solidarity of the Iranian women next door.
It's amazing.
That's bravery.
Yeah, serious bravery. Yeah, that's courage. It's courage. Well, thank you, Suzanne. This has been such a rich conversation, and also, please listen to her podcast, Women Building Peace. I've listened to a few episodes. It's terrific, and continue to share this story, and please tune into her documentary. So I want to thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Good night, Suzanne.
Bye.
So that was Suzanne Kianpour. Apologize, pronounced it Suzanne for a second. It's Suzanne Kianpour, who is the presenter of the BBC documentary Out of the Shadows, which is about Iran and Israel and peace in the Middle East, giving us some perspective on what's going on in Iran and the protests. And I think some of the main takeaways that I really had is the incredible bravery of women, the fact that men are supporting them, and how critical that is to fomenting a revolution. Is it's not just one gender, that men are protecting women, they're coming to their sides, they're filming, they're helping, they're spreading the news. The person who Shervin, who wrote this beautiful song, which I encourage you to watch and look at the translation because it's really emotional, is a man. And so having both genders, I think, is really important. And I also heard a call to action of the men of the United States to stand up and be activists on behalf of Roe v. Wade, because this isn't just about women and having rights to their body. It's about families having the choice of whether to have a child or not, and whether or not you should be able to decide that as a family unit, or whether the government should make that decision. So you call to arms to the men as well here, that reproductive rights is under threat. And I think what also sticks out to me is we may not be cold to theocracy, but the Supreme Court's most recent decisions are so religious in nature, it would be impossible not to call us a religious country. Not a theocracy, we are a democracy, but the Supreme Court's decisions are so based upon religion, it's really impossible to say otherwise. And we are, like she said, religious, as Iran is religious. And I know I'll get blowback for that, but I don't really care. So The last thing I want to do is I want to show you a very cool video, which is we did 4 shows on Ukraine here, and I think something that also sticks out to me is, and a shout out to my student from the Women's Leadership Challenge, Olga, for being a just all around amazing woman. That Ukrainian women are really tough, and so are Persian women, and so I love this video, which shows Ukrainian women literally in the trenches singing this anti-fascist Italian song. And then you're going to see the same song sung by Iranian women, showing the transnational nature of women's movement. So let's take a look at that.
Аліни і барактари за Україну б'ють русню. А наші люди, а українці проти русні об'єднали вже цілий світ. І скоро зовсім русні не буде, а буде мир на всій землі. І скоро зовсім русні не буде, а буде мир на всій землі. خاک این گندم تو خیابونه، خوشه خشم من و تو تشنه بارونه. حق ما کم نیست، زانوی غم نیست، قلب ما که دور از هم نیست. دنیای تازه این یه آغاز.
So that was Ukrainian women singing the same song as the Persian women, which is really, I just find really amazing. So I want to thank our sponsors again, Stream Inspectors, the leaders in live stream production. I want to encourage you to check out SOCAP, which is a conference that convenes the largest and most diverse impact investing community in the world. For more than 15 years, SOCAP has been the flagship event and leading convener in the impact economy, gathering more than 100,000 people since our first event. So you're interested in impact investing and social change. That conference is October 17th for 4 days in San Francisco in person. Thank goodness I will be there. And also the Women's Leadership Challenge. So what is the Women's Leadership Challenge? It is a program that helps women to step into their power and become change makers like Suzanne. I loved when she said, I wouldn't have worn the hijab either. That speaks to values being more important than fear. And this program is really about understanding who you are as a woman, as a leader, your values, your purpose in this life, and then how do you use that to create your next steps in life and also to create social and political change on the issues you care about. So here's a short video about the Women's Leadership Challenge.
I took the Women's Leadership Challenge in early 2021.
Samantha told me before I started that this could possibly change my life. And you know what? I think it might have done.
It gave me the very breakthrough I needed.
Fulfilled me in so many ways.
Found all my senses through this class.
So welcomed me just as I was. I believe that we need more women leaders in the world. Women leaders who lead in innovative, creative, courageous ways that are true to who they are, that aren't a manufactured version of what a man would do at the top. So we're going to do things like finding your purpose, but we're also going to do things like looking at how do you create institutional change. Your cohort will become your sisters that will support you, elevate, lift you up.
I highly recommend that any woman who's looking for a pivot, looking for a boost, feeling imposter syndrome, definitely recommend the Women's Leadership Challenge.
It's really been a wonderful, life-changing, empowering experience, and I hope that you will join it as well.
So you may recognize the woman in that video. Yes, that is me. That is my day job, if you could call it, but I absolutely love teaching, empowering, helping, connecting women across borders to really drive social change and be the leaders that they're meant to be. The fall virtual cohort is now full and has a wait list. So I'm accepting applications for the spring cohort, which is already almost half full. I only run 4 of these cohorts a year. And then there's 1 spot left for the Washington, D.C. cohort, which is coming up and starting in November in person. So if you're interested, check out www.womensleadershipchallenge.com. Or to get on my mailing list, you can text the word empower, EMPOWER, to 66866. You'll also get an access there to a free download, which is your 6-step guide to unbeatable confidence. So if you want to be a women leader like Suzanne, please check out the Women's Leadership Challenge and Stream Inspectors, your leaders in live stream production, as well as SOCAP. And listen to Suzanne. We really do need to raise awareness about this. Foreign policy is so masculinized, and what these women are doing is a watershed moment in history. So please share this episode. If you think this issue is important, share it with your friends, share it with your colleagues, share it with men, share it with people so that we can raise awareness of this, because the traditional Western media isn't really covering this enough. You can find us on YouTube, on Facebook, and also tomorrow the episode will be on Apple and Spotify podcasts. If you're listening on any of these platforms, please subscribe, like, and rate us. That really helps us to be able to support production of this show. If you really care and think what we're doing is important, we also encourage you to become a monthly subscriber on Patreon for as little as $3 a month. That's right, for $3 a month, which is legitimately less than the price of a Starbucks, you can support the voices of women in foreign policy. Like Suzanne was saying, only 25% of stories focus on women. So be the change you want to see in the world. Support us on Patreon. It's incredibly important to helping support our production costs and this amazing production team we have. I think that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in to Samantha Politics, and we'll see you on the next show. Good night, everybody.